Good afternoon. Am I okay to start, Mark?
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar on travel and transport. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This webinar comes after a couple of previous ones we've done around reuse, and we also did one with the Salix and Alexander Hammond on finance quite recently. So we're pleased to announce this webinar where we're going to be looking at transport and travel. This is on the back of a recent survey that the campaign conducted into travel and transport barriers. One of the biggest issues we found through the survey was a lack of leadership around travel and planning and issues around car parking and crowding, really, in the sense of availability of car parking. So we put together this webinar with the support of Basemap and the guys at the BPA, the British Parking Association, to help NHS Trust Estates Directors to look at travel and transport challenges. So I'm going to introduce today's panellists. First up, we will have Ian Goodwin, owner and founder of the Parking Consultancy. Ian has over 20 years experience in parking and sustainable travel planning sector. He's worked for a range of public and private sector organisations, including Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council, Central Manchester NHS, and Belmont Council over in Australia. Ian founded the Parking Consultancy in 2016, specialising in providing car parking and sustainable travel services to universities and hospitals. Ian has chaired the BPA's Special Interest Group for Higher Education for the past 4 years and is an elected member of the BPA's Council of Representatives. Our speaker following Ian will be Dan Suanders, who's Product Manager at Basemap. Dan has been designing and delivering transport-based software solutions for nearly 10 years now, supplying both software and data to NHS, councils and central government departments. Dan works on Basemap's flagship product, Track, which is used by many authorities to provide ongoing monitoring for their transportation networks. Dan also has experience with detailed transportation data sets, having worked in the team that delivered Travel Line's national data set, which is now used to power many web, mobile and desktop applications. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Ian, and Ian's going to have 15 minutes to go through some of his slides and talk a little bit more about what BPA are doing to support NHS Trust. Ian, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the comprehensive that was said in the introduction. I've worked in sustainable transport, planning and parking for over 20 years for a range of public and private sector organisations. You may wonder why I'm here talking at a sustainability webinar about parking. It often frustrates me that parking is seen in isolation of sustainable transport planning, and obviously the two policies should align. When I worked at Central Manchester NHS Trust about 7 years ago now, we were undergoing one of the biggest PFI redevelopments in the country, which led to us losing about 1,600 spaces on site for about a 2-year period. We had to implement a wide range of car parking policies and demand management measures, including needs-based assessments of parking eligibility, and to really see what staff were going to retain their permits and stay on site or be moved off site onto large-scale parking rides. Without heavy investments and focus on the sustainable transport plan and aligning the two policies together, we would have never achieved the project successfully in terms of managing that demand and keeping the hospital site operational. I'm here to talk to you today about the PIPA accreditation launched by the British Parking Association a couple of years ago, which is the Professionalism in Parking accreditation. It's an all-encompassing accreditation process looking at parking operations and best practice at hospital sites and at universities, and it really supports sustainable transport plans and their implementation. So I'd just like to give you some background to PIPA, current accredited organisations, the assessment process, the different areas of assessment, one example of those areas of assessments to give you a little bit more detail, some of the key drivers to adopt PIPA, the benefits, recognition package, costs and testimonials, and that should take about 10-15 minutes. So the BPA has been raising standards in the private parking industry for over 40 years, since its inception in the 1970s. You may have heard of some of their other schemes and accreditations, such as ParkMark, which really looks at safety, crime prevention, and the physical facilities in terms of the actual car parking facilities themselves. The Approved Operator Scheme is a scheme implemented by the BPA to really guide the step of bringing all of those accreditations together into one standard, and really, again, raising standards within parking within the NHS and the university sector. So it's a single organisational audit covering shared standards applicable to all sectors, and the intention is eventually this accreditation will be rolled out to more sectors, but currently being trialled in higher education and healthcare, plus the specific criteria and standards for each of the two trial sectors. So there was a prestigious launch at the House of Commons last year, hosted by the then President of the BPA, Phil Hammond, and the first two trusts to ever receive the award, Lancashire and Salisbury NHS trusts, attended and were provided with their certificates. So the assessment process, the organisation applies for the audit. They're sent a self-assessment pack, so the accreditation process is a self-assessment process. The organisation completes and submits the evidence to the BPA. An area manager then reviews the self-assessment and arranges to conduct a site audit to liaise with the organisation to clarify any of the information provided or to fill in any of the missing gaps. That's then sent to a BPA moderator to review the audit to ensure consistency and high standards across the accreditation and across the different hospital sites that undertake the process. And the BPA then notifies the organisation of the outcome. If successful, the organisation is accredited for 2 years with a self-assessment process halfway through to maintain the standard. If the organisation unfortunately isn't successful within the first instance of completing the accreditation and the audit and the site audit, they're given 12 months to complete those areas where they failed and to evidence those to hopefully then achieve the accreditation. And there's a small cost of about £250 for the area manager to come out and reassess the site. So there's 9 standards in all: customer service and stakeholder relationships, safer and properly maintained parking facilities. That second point will assess car parks up to the standard of ParkMark whilst not actually attaining that accreditation. That is still a separate accreditation for the physical car parking facilities, but the point is that they will be assessed up to the standard of ParkMark. Fair pricing and easy-to-use payment services, fair enforcement of parking terms and conditions, impartial and fair appeal service accessible to all, clear and comprehensive parking information, and then some wider, more generic standards around employee wellbeing, development recognition, social responsibility and quality service delivery, and continuous improvement. And we'll just now on the next slide look at that first standard in a little bit more detail. The organisation has and follows an up-to-date travel plan for the purpose of managing car parks. The organisation liaises with neighbours and the local community. The organisation considers the needs of all car park users, including those with special access needs. The organisation engages in wider professional practice. Sorry, I repeated that one. The organisation offers appropriate facilities for those with special access needs. So the point 3 was it considers a holistic view of all users, including patient visitors and staff. The organisation offers identified pick-up and drop-off parking areas, and the organisation collects and learns from car park user feedback. There's a wide range of information and evidence that can be collated, and there's also a useful help guide that supports the assessment process to show hospital trusts the types of information and evidence that can be provided. So some of the key drivers, a couple of years ago the Department of Health brought out some guidance called the Healthcare Technical Memorandum on Parking, and that really laid out some key principles of how hospital trusts should operate and manage parking, working with third parties in certain instances. That covered some key principles such as prioritising permits to those with the greatest need, offering pay on exit payment systems, offering concessions to certain user groups and patients, and not letting contracts on the basis of purely revenue generation in terms of enforcement notices, and to act and identify rogue contractors who were fulfilling their duties at hospital trusts. We feel PIPA certainly aligns and complements this guidance from the Department of Health and helps hospital trusts to demonstrate compliance with those key principles. PIPA also helps hospitals to demonstrate and celebrate excellence in terms of parking management and practice. Not all organisations will be at the level where they can achieve PIPA in the first instance, but the BPA will work with organisations to identify areas of improvements. We hope all hospital trusts will be able to consider PIPA, although they may not be in a position to attain it in the first instance. Improving accessibility to healthcare. There's lots of research out there on physical access to clinical care, but very little research on accessibility, physically accessing the trust in terms of transport provision and parking. A key driver in the NHS trust, as we all know at the moment, is efficiency savings, and as I say, PIPA really supports and aligns to sustainable travel plans and developing a more holistic access strategy to the trust. Some of the benefits, celebrating success and raising standards through an accredited standard and a structured audit. And I think the important point there, it's an external audit by a professional trade body rather than the trust saying we're doing good things with our parking practice. CQC audits, they talk about the holistic view of the patient journey. Fortunately or unfortunately, the first view of the hospital trust many patients and visitors get is their parking experience, and CQC audits are starting to pick up on parking as key recommendations for improvements. I did quite a lot of research when starting this project on do not attends and specific links to parking or transport difficulties. I found a couple of studies out there, one from the University of East London, which attributed about 70% of do not attends to transport difficulties, and about 40% of those people had driven to site. And another study attributed about 12% of do not attends to transport difficulties, but didn't factor out how much parking attributed to that. I think the point I'm trying to make is do not attends are costing the NHS a lot of money each year, and even a small reduction in do not attends from better parking practice could save considerable amounts of money for the NHS. By taking a holistic view of your parking operations and practice, it could help to identify greater efficiencies in car parking operation, reducing costs and highlighting potential cost savings. I think a key one for the NHS, which often is surrounded in bad press and complaints around parking, is PIPA helps to demonstrate and increase customer satisfaction and reduce stress for visitors and patients. It also supports some of the principles of the Lord Carter Review on model hospitals around moving towards a patient-centred organisational design, and implementing a comprehensive operational management process which drives performance efficiencies, reduces costs and provides continuous improvement. Again, I think a lot of trusts certainly are in the press around bad parking practice and management, and we feel PIPA could help to demonstrate good parking practice and management. Lots of trusts struggling with capacity issues and managing parking, but by attaining an accreditation showing that they have good principles, it can show that whilst everything may not be perfect in terms of the parking management, they're certainly at that higher standard than some of the other trusts in the country. And also helping to combat those complaints, bad press and freedom of information requests. So something I've been working with the BPA over the last 6 months to develop is to add a bit more value to the accreditation and recognition package. So we'd look to have a national recognition and awards event each year, probably tied to one of the large corporate events the BPA runs, such as the annual dinner or the annual conference. We're also offering the first 10 PIPA accreditations a 3 years membership of the BPA and all the benefits that come with that. A marketing pack to help make best use out of the award, things like template press releases, and then some more on the ground operational recognition points, such as pin badges for staff, a recognition plaque similar to what you get in Investors in People to show visitors and the wider public that you've achieved this award at the main reception or car parking office, some vinyl banners to put into the car park to again show greater awareness to the public that the trust has achieved this accreditation, and stickers, vinyl stickers for existing car park signage. And we're also looking at providing discounts on other professional development courses and schemes provided by the BPA. So the BPA have structured the cost structure for undertaking PIPA based on hospital trusts' engagement with some of the other accreditations, specifically Parkmark and also BPA membership. So the costs range from between £2,000 and £5,000 over a 2-year period. So that's a cost for 2 years, dependent on being a BPA member and or Parkmark assessed and awarded. There's also a cost benefit if you're not Parkmarked. You could join the BPA, which costs somewhere around £600 to £900 depending on income, which again would reduce your PIPA fee. So just to finish, a couple of testimonials from a couple of the recent universities that come on board and undertaken PIPA over the last 3 months. And then just moving on to any questions you may have on my contact details if you'd like to discuss PIPA in a bit more detail, or possibly for me to come on the tech side to have a one-to-one meeting with you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for that presentation. Some really interesting slides in there. I mean, some of them that jump out to me already is you said about the impact on the NHS in terms of no-shows and do-not attends, which is staggering, really, due to transport issues. I think it makes for some fantastic understanding. When they do not attend, you said that you got a bit of information there. How thorough was that research? Was that just was that all the trusts, or just a
No, that was literally just 2 studies looking at 2 specific trusts, and they were quite outdated, to be honest. I think the studies were going back to early 2000, in 2002 and 2000, the studies. And I think the point there is there's very little research out there conducted or even questions asked to patients and visitors at the point of do not attend of, was that attributed to transport difficulties and or parking? That would obviously help provide a better body of evidence if those sort of questions were asked when collating the do not attend information and feedback from visitors and patients.
Yeah, you mentioned there about a little bit about kind of getting people certified and engaging to address this, because obviously it's in the press, in and out of the press with car parking charges. I only recently attended on a trip to Stepping Hill Hospital near to where we're based, and I mean the car parking charges and the problem with car parking were horrendous.
Yeah.
Where do you see things evolving, not only with what you're doing with PIPA, but in terms of addressing parking going down the road? I mean, with the current NHS cost crisis and the situation they're in, I can't see obviously parking fees being removed. Where do you think where do you think the balance lies in terms of pleasing both patient and trust? Because it is an important aspect of revenue for the NHS in that sense. But where do you feel there's a common ground for this?
I think from what I see from undertaking about 20 site visits over the last 3 to 6 months with various NHS trusts across the country, every single trust is struggling with capacity. There's a number of drivers for that. You know, A&E departments are closing, emerging, services are emerging, and you know, trusts are becoming specialist clinical centres for certain aspects of care. And whole trusts are also merging together, and that's happening across the country. So unfortunately that demand is ever increasing, and car parking capacity is not. So there's a number of ways that can be managed through, obviously through price, two policies tightly together in terms of sustainable transport options, and actually providing revenue and financing from car parking revenue to make those options attractive and viable for both staff and visitors. And without having that balance, trusts are going to continue to struggle with capacity. I don't think there's a silver bullet in terms of, you know, one element will solve all the problems, but an accreditation such as PIPA helps you to look at all aspects and bring that together, you know, into, I suppose, one policy, identifying, as I say, efficiencies and better ways of working.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Something that we found in the campaign for a good length of time now, that transport and travel has been a key aspect, whether it's sustainable travel in terms of implementing electrical vehicles, but it's great to actually address something like this, which is the challenge of looking at infrastructure and car parking, because it's generally seen as something which is dealt by front of house in the NHS, but obviously it's a big aspect of an estate director's workload in terms of dealing with something like this. And you know, it's interesting to understand a little bit more about what you're doing in terms of engaging with these as you go across the country. Anyway, we're going to move on to our next speaker. I think we're ready for Dan.
Hi Scott. Sorry to chip in there. We just had a couple of other questions come in. If you want to take those now.
All right. Yeah.
One from Preeti Gohill. Which other sectors do intend rolling PIPA out to? How does PIPA fit into wider planning, e.g. retail sites? And to follow on from that, from Alexis Keach, where do you feel that electric vehicle charging points will feature in car parks in the future?
Let's go to the first one then. What was the first question again, Matthew?
It was around rolling out PIPA to other sectors. Yeah. I think, you know, from the British Parking Association's perspective, they see obviously universities and higher education as certainly their primary targets in terms of where PIPA fits, best fits, and can provide the greatest benefit. That said, you know, different standards and area of assessment will be developed for different sectors such as retail. They will have potentially different clients and users and different needs and requirements. It's difficult to sort of speculate how that assessment will work and some of the standards or changes to the standards, but there will be certain criteria that can be brought over from the assessment process of hospitals and universities, such as fair pricing, good enforcement practices, physical infrastructure, but working with the sectors will also identify other areas that should be assessed and they require as well.
Yeah.
In terms of the EV, it's a very interesting one. We've had a couple of sort of presentations from different electric vehicle charging companies at the group I chair for the British Parking Association, more concentrated on higher education. But again, same issues, same growth and challenges. I think some of the major challenges is providing, and should hospital trusts provide electric vehicle charging for their users, whether that's staff or visitors. There's an argument for both sides. Certainly with people having home charging and wider networks of charging points at supermarkets and on highway networks, for example, you could argue there's not a need for people to have EV charging facilities on site. but obviously it should form part of your wider access strategy. Planning for EV is a challenge because you know, how many points should you provide? I suppose it's as the market grows and demand dictates, but I think some of the key principles is if you're putting in EV charging points, make sure you put capacity in terms of ducting and power supplies and networking to expand that network in that area, so you're not duplicating your civils costs, and also to consider actually charging for the electricity, because if you don't, people will abuse it. They'll keep their vehicles charging all day, taking up that space for someone else to use and recharge the vehicle. So approaches that have been proposed is things like having a 50p per hour charge for the first 3 or 4 hours while someone pretty much recharges the vehicle, and then a much higher charge of, say, £5 an hour thereafter to force people to move the vehicle and free up that space through pricing.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for that, and thank you for the questions, everyone. Welcome them. And hopefully you may have some more a little bit later. Obviously the presentation slide will be available for everybody afterwards. We're going to move on to our next presentation now. That will be coming from Dan Suanders, who's Product Manager at Basemap. And Basemap are doing some great work around their product track, working with NHS trusts and authorities to look at transportation networks. There's a little bit there that we touched on before from Ian, where Ian said about the do not attends and the difficulties getting to the trust. And it's not only parking where the difficulty comes, it's obviously from the actual transport planning and the location of the trust and the problems that go with it. And that's something that Basemap have been addressing for a number of years. So I'm going to introduce Dan. I'm going to hand over to him and let him talk a little bit more about the work they're doing. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Scott. That was interesting stuff, and thanks for the kind words, and thanks, Ian, as well. I found your presentation very interesting. So, my name's Dan. I'm from Basemap, as said, and we're going to be here chatting to you about a few case studies on how different NHS trusts and CCGs have been using our software and solutions to help themselves out in their kind of day-to-day problems. So, speaking of day-to-day problems, with our existing customer base and for people we've spoken to before with regards to parking, the same kind of issues keep reoccurring. So car parking is always in the news. There's constantly pressure of hospitals to ensure they have the right number of spaces, for the right type of people. And there's always pressure on them to then introduce ways to manage that, such as a sustainable car park permit system. Also, when we chat to customers a lot and they see the hospital in the news, you know, Joe Bloggs missed his appointment because he couldn't get a car parking space. There's something in the news the other week about someone dropped off an elderly relative but couldn't get a car parking space for half an hour. All of these things are really, really bad things and can bring up a lot of emotions as well. And as you've seen with our customers, that parking can be very emotive. You know, people have got their own view and everyone thinks they should have a car parking space themselves. You always hear the complaints as well, both from staff and from patients, that there's never ever enough spaces for them, and all this ties into that everyone thinks it's their right sometimes to have a car parking space. Well, the reality is some people might live very close by and therefore could travel in by different means, different modes. They could walk in, they could cycle in, they could even get the bus in. And overall, everyone is pretty much in agreement that any type of system that is implemented needs to be a fair system and needs to monitor the system as well. And every time we start speaking about kind of car parking and changing their modes of transport to travel in, active travel comes up. So people are always very keen to promote active travel, to get people out of their car onto a bicycle or to walk into a site. And the great thing about this helps them promote staff health, you know, get people fitter by walking and cycling to work, and their mental well-being as well. And there's lots of studies that back that up. Also, when promoting cycling, you can also look at the cycle to work schemes, you know, where you can share the cost of purchasing a bicycle, or looking at car share schemes as well, and also allowing any kind of income that might come in from a car park permit or car parking to be used for sustainability, to look at the provision of cycle racks or showers for people who do cycle in. Also, I think it's very important to communicate the benefits of walking and cycling as well. It's very easy saying that from here, but I think it's very good to kind of show that and tell people that actually if you do this, you can save money potentially. Also, people don't actually know a lot of the time about different public transport options. I go back to when I went to Kingston Hospital last week, and I went on the website to find out how I could commute there via public transport. It gave me a list of services and stops, but I then had to go elsewhere out of that site to work out where do I get that service, how much is it going to cost, how long is it going to take me. And that feeds into collaboration with other local transport partnerships with companies. So in Cambridge, there's a thing going on, it's a cross-working policy where they're looking at improving access not just to the hospital, but to the university and to many other sites, working with the council and bus operators. And all of this feeds into the overarching target of reducing carbon emissions by 40% by 2030. And if you look at the makeup of emissions, travel is actually quite a high proportion of that. So in a particular example we're talking about today with Oxford Health, they had all of their kind of issues we spoke about previously. So they had a real need to introduce a sustainable car parking permit system. And the reason for that is they're basically running out of car parking spaces, or they had run out of car parking spaces. So the issue is here, as the business grows, as people get older and they start offering more services, they're needing to pull staff in from further afield. So you have people travelling into Oxford or Oxford sites from places like Milton Keynes or down from Southampton. And the problem is everyone would then, struggle to park anywhere, so people start parking in emergency access or red route locations, which provided their own health and safety issues. They also had an overarching need to increase active travel and to reduce congestion around a hospital. You never want an emergency service vehicle to turn up and not be able to access the site because people are parked on red routes, and they wanted to stop that happening. And also they could see what the benefit would be in active travel and what the correlation would be with the reduction in congestion. So they decided that they needed to have a new car parking management system, and that overall had to be fair for all members of staff. It had to be available for all of their sites, and over 100 different individual sites in total. When looking at it, they found out that actually a straight line approach was not accurate enough, and they thought it was very important to look at travel times and to consider different variables such as time of day and things like footpaths. So what they did is, they looked at the traditional methods, so the straight line distances we can see here going to a particular location in Southampton. And here we can see using the straight line method, there's 42,290 people within that 1 mile catchment. But however, when you look at that map in more detail, you can see the River Itchen. That's a natural barrier that in this type of map is allowing people to act like Jesus and to walk across the water. And this is where we at Basemap and with our track software, this is where we differ. So track effectively allows you then to start bringing in different types of data sets to supplement that type of map. So you can bring in public transport data, produce a travel time catchment for that, car, cycle and walking data as well, giving you very, very accurate multimodal travel times. Where we really kind of set apart is it allows you to adjust the transportation network as well. So you can add new roads or exclude roads where required, and you can see the routes that are undertaken. So in the bottom left, we've got a map showing 10, 20 and 30-minute walking to a site, and different colours you can see there, the green, pink, orange and purple, is effectively showing different walking routes. So you can then put new links in or remove links to work out how people's paths might change. So looking at the purple option there, it might make more sense to do a little bridge over the river to reduce that little journey. And you can do the same for public transport as well. So if you want to remove a bus service or add a bus service in, you can decide and model that within track. The outputs, they vary out of the software. So this is the things that are useful to then show to your business. Predominantly, a travel time contour map like that on the left is produced, but we can produce things such as CSV files that can show you the exact journey that was used, or we can show you a matrix showing here's the postcode, these are the different sites, and these are the journey times. We can also produce catchment maps. So on the right-hand side, we've got a series of dots that are coloured in. These are coloured in based on which hospital, which site is the closest for that person to get to. So if anyone needs to go to a hospital site for an outpatient centre, that's the best one to recommend to them based on travel time. And all this type of analysis can be underpinned with detailed demographic data, either from the census or data held elsewhere. So when you start bringing this into our track software package, you can start really getting some intelligence on the outputs. So what we can see here is the blue area is showing what a mile actually looks like, what that mile looks like when you're using the underlying road network. So we can see a lot of the area is no longer covered. we can then see the natural barrier of the River Itchen coming into play. So we can see effectively that 1 mile distance is being cut off, almost at the centre because of the River Itchen. And that's then represented by the drop in the population. So we've gone down to 15,500 people, which is just over a third of the total amount of people that are originally within that 1 mile catchment. So then what we can do is we can do the what if scenario. So what if we wanted to put a new footbridge across the river? What does a mile now look like? That's effectively what we can see here. We can see the mile distance then going across the other side of the river. And then we can then see that that then contains an extra few thousand people able to do that journey. So then we started looking at using these type of scenarios in with Oxford Health. The very first thing they came across and they realised they needed to look at was to work out what the cut-off time should be for the car parking permits. So they thought very important, to be fair, to go to the union and let the union decide what their cut-off time should be. And they came back and said, right, we're looking at a 25-minute walk or a 25-minute cycle or a 45-minute commute via public transport. And the important thing here is looking at public transport in both directions. So not only getting to the site, but getting home from the site at the end of a shift pattern as well. And the software is very adept at being able to do that. And all of this would then allow them that if it took someone 40 minutes in both directions to get the bus into work, for example, then they wouldn't potentially be able to drive and get a car parking permit off the back of that. What Lynn decided to do is, it was a bit short-sighted just to look at existing staff. So they looked at every postcode they could within a 2-hour buffer of the outskirts of their 130 odd sites. This then allows them to future-proof the system. So as a new staff member comes in, they can then see exactly if they're valid for a car parking permit or not. And these results were output into a large CSV file that were powered off an existing HR system. So staff could go in and see were they able to get a car parking permit or not. And I think it's important to stress here that actually travel time was not the only element that dictated if they got a permit or not. So there's other things at play, such as, is that staff member need to go between different sites or see patients at their homes, and that could override the kind of travel time decision. The great thing is the system went live and straight away they could see an increase in active travel. They could see more people using alternative modes to get to their sites. And that was visible, first of all, because of the reduction in congestion. People weren't parking on the red routes anymore. There was less cars parked out on the streets around the kind of the sites. And the car park didn't have people parking all over the place. Really positive stuff. They also then looked at it and then found out that actually, because of the track software, if someone didn't believe the results they were getting out, they had a robust evidence base. So they could say, well, actually, you can walk to in 20 minutes, and if required, they could show them the walking route, or they could show them what bus they needed to get to do that travel into work. So then they produced outputs that kind of look, this is an example of a different location, but it kind of gives you an idea. So on the left-hand side, we have a staff member's postcode. And then what we do off the back of that is we have the data, so we can see what their cycle time to get to a place of work is, what their walk time is, and a distance in meters as well. And then we get a public transport journey in both directions. So I can see that the first postcode, SO15 2NU, they've got a 13-minute journey on the bus home at the end of the day, but a 14.5-minute journey at the beginning of the day. And all of this would then feed into the HR system, giving a vast amounts of information that they could then provide to any customer or a patient if required. There are visual rules we can do, so I would love to, when I went to Kingston Hospital, to see something like this. And this is a walking map around from the site. So here we can see 5-minute walking bands away from John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, and we've got 3 different points representing the different walking or site entrances for that. We can then see where you've got your darker colours representing a longer journey. We can see some nestled in closer to the hospital because there's poor walking access due to people living in housing estates and so on. A similar study in a different sector showed that actually by producing these sort of walking maps, you could look to expect about a 27% increase in modal shifts, so getting people out of their cars into sustainable transport modes, get them walking to sites, because lots of the time people don't know how long or how short that walk is. What you can also do as well is produce a map that can show every postcode. So here we can see postcodes of staff members in and around Oxford, showing journey times to John Radcliffe. Again, the dots that are green can do that journey within 45 minutes or less, and the ones in red take longer than 45 minutes. And what's interesting here is you look at Abingdon to the south of the map, you can see there's a little core little area of green where people can get there, but there's little red areas where people might be very close just outside of that catchment. And therefore doing a few little tweaks to the network might enable that green zone to expand out further. Or you might see I've got a fair few staff members living in Bicester. Look at different options we can do in Bicester to help get people into the John Radcliffe area much quicker. And also is very, very, very positive, and that's kind of shown by the lovely testimonial we've got here from Tanya. I'll let you have a quick read through of that. But the great thing is here, they can see that straight away that the increase in people changing their travel behaviour. That's a really positive thing for us. We've got lots of these maps and much more detailed information on the case study on our website, and you can see the link at the bottom here. So what we can also see as well is with our existing customers, we asked them how else do they use Track. And we've got a few different examples here. I'll just cherry pick a few out at the moment. One thing that's becoming more and more obvious is looking at bus subsidies. So in a lot of examples, a hospital will subsidise a number of bus routes to try and help improve surface access for it. And actually you can look at that across your kind of campus, across your site, and say, well, actually, are we getting the best bang for our buck here? You can start editing that data and work out what might work best or what isn't working as well. On the public transport side of things, there's forever cuts going on in councils where they're cutting bus routes. You can see what that knock-on effect might be for yourselves about not only staff getting onto an NHS site, but also passengers and going to outpatient centres as well. And the more positive news, in some instances, if you're very lucky, you're able to build a new site. And if in that example, you want to make sure you're going into the right location. And you can look at planning, not only where that location should be, but what improvements need to be made to the cycle network or the walking network or the public transport network off the back of that. And cars, very important still. While we're trying to promote people getting to the site elsewhere, you can model car access. And we've got a product called TM Speeds that allows you to do that. And if you use a nighttime speed, it's very close to a representation of blue light travel times. And we'll come back to that in a moment. As you can see as well, you can look at the catchment areas of hospitals. And also importantly, you can look at the commissioning of new health services. So if you want to put a new stroke centre somewhere, you can work out where it's best located based on population using things such as census data. An example of that is using a slightly different case study. This is some work that was done down in Somerset. And what happened here is they wanted to close Yeovil Hospital. Yeovil Hospital being right in the centre of the map at the moment. So what they did is they decided at Somerset that actually NHS England were making a bad judgment call here. So they wanted to produce an evidence base where they could go up and say, actually, we don't think that is a good idea. So they produced lots of maps and lots of analysis to help them out with that. And one of them was to show a blue light travel time. So here we can see blue light travel time across Somerset and the surrounding areas, and Yeovil being very nice, lots of yellow colours representing shorter journey times. What we can then see is what happens if you close Yeovil Hospital. So Yeovil is a place, it's got quite a high population, and we can see from travel time starts of 10 to 20 minutes, you can see a much larger area now being covered by the cold blues and the green colours representing very long journey times. And they then overlaid where actually strokes had occurred and managed to overturn that decision. And this was a great story for me personally, because you'll see at the top in the street, my uncle lives there, and he had a stroke about 6 months after the decision was overturned. Luckily he was okay because he was taken to Yeovil Hospital, but it does make me think if that hospital had been closed down, it might have been a different output. So to kind of summarise the software, it's meant to be a very, very easy to use application. It's a desktop application that you have full control over. There's no sharing of information with any third party or anything like that. And it's very flexible, so you can view and load your own different data sets into that system. And you can just view bus timetables and view what kind of services are running in the area. Then you can start looking at, okay, what happens if we start removing, we're adding different hospitals or sites, so you can then start influencing if that is a good or bad idea. You can also use your own maps to help assist with the pressure on parking, give different information to staff and to patients to try and get them to travel to sites in a different manner. And you can also therefore encourage active travel as well very easily off the back of that. I think what's really important here as well, which I have lots of customers at the moment who use the system, but they do it through consultants. By doing it internally or in-house, you can control the cost of data or the cost of queries as well, so there's no need to outsource that, and you can build knowledge internally off the back of that as well. We've got lots of really great case studies on our website. and lots of other great information as well that might be of use to you. I'd please suggest having a look. If you want to get in contact with some kind of details here. So no, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dan. Yes, apologies for that initial disruption on the first initial slides. While Dan was presenting, their slides will be made available to everybody straight after this. You've had a question come in, Dan, from Pretty Hill, who's asked the cut-off travel time
is effectively it's only for the car parking permit type of things. It was just the criteria that, you know, if you can get to a walk for a 20-25 minute cycle, I think there's a duty of care there that you shouldn't be providing parking for them. You should be forcing people to active travel and trying to promote the other benefits that you have, such as, you know, benefits to your health and your well-being as well. So they weren't trying to run it just under the criteria, and that was all done, as I said, through the union. So kind of gave them that kind of backup that the union agreed to it.
Yeah. Outside of Oxford, where else are you looking to work with, or what particular areas across the country are you working with?
So we've got clients already using this software from Forth Valley up in Scotland, in Wales, down in Somerset, Southampton. We've got many different clients at the moment using it. What we do, though, however, see is we see a lot of consultants doing this work on behalf of NHS trusts, and I think there's a real kind of missing it, because at the time you want to change something or edit something, they're using our software, but the NHS trusts are spending a lot of money on that. So by doing it in-house and doing it themselves, they can do this what-if scenario and easily study and look at that. But no, the data is available for the whole country. There's no kind of limitations on size. You've got schools, CCGs, and trusts using it, up to the largest CSCs and using the software as well.
Right. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, everybody. We will be sending out the slide from today very, very soon, and we'll also be putting in there a summary of the recent survey to actually identify some of the challenges that a lot of other trusts have faced, actually. A lot of people who answered it were part of travel project teams, and they've been able to give us some really good feedback. But there's also been some other quite interesting areas on it where there's a lot of trusts that are looking at car sharing in their organisation, and there is nearly 100% of people surveyed are encouraging cycling within their staff and for people coming to the trust, which is fantastic to see and hear. But they're also utilising communications. Around 80% of survey respondents are using communications across the trust to promote sustainable travel. So I think there's a lot of positives to take from the way that travel is being addressed in the NHS, but I think there is still some work to do, mostly around car parking and location and coming and going to hospitals, of which we pointed out in the first presentation is costing the NHS a huge amount of money. So what I would like to do now is thank both Daniel and Ian, and also to Basemap for supporting this webinar. If you haven't filled out the survey yet, we can send you out a copy, and please feel free to do that. It'd be great to get all your information as we move forward towards Sustainability Day. One of the other key things to just talk about quickly is our award ceremony is coming up on May the 17th, and we have our deadline for entries on the 2nd of March, whilst we'll be over at Leeds for our final roadshow. And you can see the team from Basemap who'll be over there. You can speak to Dan, Maggie, Sophie and the team over there if you would like to. But if you want to get your entry in, please do it within the next 10 days. You may be working on a transport plan currently. You may be working on some work around travel, communications. Go in there. We've got 10 different categories. We really want you to get entries in. We will announce the shortlist on Sustainability Day. Each shortlisted organisation will get a funded ticket to come along to London. It's a fantastic evening celebrating the success of people working the NHS, which I think is something that we all need to be doing at the moment given the current situation and the challenges faced by everybody. So let's promote the positives. Thank you all again for joining in. I hope you'll be doing something with sustainability on 23rd of March. And thanks again to our presenters and to Basemap for today's webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.